Hey everyone, welcome back to the Crosswinds Church More Than Sunday podcast. Excited you're joining us today. We're going to have a conversation with Chris Scott, who is one of the pastors at Oak Life Church, a church that we got to play a part in helping plant 6 years ago. And you're going to hear all about what they're doing in Oakland. And we even start to get to talk a little bit about what all of this stuff we're going through right now means for the future of the church at large. So enjoy this. All right, everybody. I am here with Chris Scott, the pastor of Oak Life Church. Are you called the pastor? What do they call you at Oak Life Church, Chris?
Lead heretic. No, I'm just kidding. Greg and I.
A little bit true, though. A little bit true.
It is, depending on who you ask. But Greg and I are moving to a co-pastor model, actually. So currently we're changing all job description stuff. So we have different roles, but we'll be considered co-pastors.
All right.
But as of now, like I think the bylaws say I'm a lead pastor, which I don't like, but nothing against lead pastors.
We should talk about that because I look around and I see more and more people in my role going with the title lead pastor instead of senior pastor, which kind of implies you are the pastor to the seniors a little bit.
Right.
But I felt like John Merritt had been the senior pastor for like 25 years here. And if I didn't say senior pastor, people would be confused as to what my job was. So I stuck with it. And now I feel like it's confusing for people who are not used to the vernacular.
The word senior, like growing up, like loosely connected to church, but not really. Like Nobody uses that word unless you're a senior in high school or you're talking about seniors altogether. So
that's right. I'm either the pastor to senior citizens or seniors in high school exclusively. All right. Well, we're here with Chris, who is one of the pastors at Oak Life, and we're excited to get to do this podcast because Oak Life is a church plant in Oakland that Crosswinds had a small part in helping start a number of years ago. And I don't know that everyone at Crosswinds currently knows that story if they're new enough to Crosswinds. And maybe if they have been around Crosswinds a while and know you, Chris, they may not know what's happening lately. So I was just hoping we could hear from you today. Thanks for coming on this thing.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun to this crisis we're in. I've actually reconnected with lots of people because what else are we going to do besides like talk and go on Zoom and podcasts? Yeah,
there's a lot of reconnecting. You're right.
You used the word Crosswinds had a small part in Oak Life, and I disagree with that. I think it is a huge part because even just monetarily, but relationally and all that stuff. We probably don't thank you guys enough. But yeah, so do you want me to kind of give a quick overview of the story or something?
Yeah, man, I'd love it. I mean, as much as you can tell, just so everybody knows, Chris grew up at Crosswinds and was our middle school pastor for a long time here. And then ended up leaving to go to seminary, right? You went to Fuller down in Pasadena.
Yep. Yeah.
How long were you down in Southern California for?
Just 2.5 years. I actually finished the MDiv as we were starting Oak Life.
Okay.
Yeah, I came to faith at Crosswinds as a teenager. I don't know what point you start with the growing, like where you grew up, but some people grew up in church, like in kids ministry and stuff. And Crosswinds was where I came to faith. And at some point, Crosswinds was naive enough to hire me to work and lead stuff when I was like 19. Which there was a lot of that going on back then. I don't know if it's still the case, but was involved in youth ministry for about 7 years.
Yeah.
And then went to LA, got married, and was discerning next steps. And there was definitely a sense of planting a church for some people that we knew in the East Bay area that didn't have a space, and there wasn't a church that connected with them.
But let's talk about that for a second. When you say didn't have a space, what does that mean? Because certainly there's churches in Oakland and Berkeley and kind of near where you are. So what did you see a need for that wasn't out there?
There are so many good churches in Oakland and Berkeley. Like we've been really fortunate to make lots of amazing friends. But probably similar to the poll that Crosswinds had when it started, there was, like I've described it as like when I drive. It's not a good example. I think there are folks who, for whatever reason, and there's probably a whole bunch of reasons, but the traditional style, whether it was doctrine or just like aesthetics didn't connect to their world either unconsciously or actually like legitimately. They weren't like accepted for the way they dress or the way they vote or their views on things or their gender, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And so I think Crosswinds was early on the trend of like creating a church for people who wouldn't normally go to church, that like all the boundaries between where people are at in culture and God, we try to pull down. And so we had friends here growing up in the Bay Area, going to shows and just building a community. And like there were people like, we had some friends, actually some of our charter members, Sadie and Corey, would drive to Crosswinds from Oakland, and they had lived in Oakland for a long time, and they were part of our launch team. So there's just a sense of love for a lot of people in the Oakland, Berkeley area, and that there was a longing for something that wasn't there yet. And I don't think we knew how much that would ring true for so many people. But
what I love about you, Chris, there are church planners who feel like what they're supposed to do is go just kind of be dropped into a city that they look and they go, oh, there's some real cool growth happening in this city. This would be a strategic time for us to start a church there. Or wow, I don't think there's enough churches in this town. I'm going to go be a part of it. But the truth is, ever since I've known you, long before you ever thought to go start a church in Oakland, or at least that I knew of, you are Oakland, like through and through, dude. Like I've never seen you not wearing an A's hat, except for right now. You're wearing some other hat.
I don't know if it's being recorded, but there's one on my wall behind me.
Oh, there is. I can kind of see it. I mean, dude, you love that town. You've loved that city for forever. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I don't know if I can claim being Oakland through and through. That's like actually that's a hot button issue.
You're so Oakland, you wouldn't say it. No, it's true. You grew up in Dublin, right? You're from
Dublin, Pleasanton, Hayward. Yeah.
Okay. But there was a passion in you to go to that city.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful city. And this is before, I think maybe I this is too overly confident, but I think it was before it became really cool. Like the cool factor wasn't the draw.
Right.
The draw was other things. And namely people and a story. So my family is from the Bay Area for generations. And I've always been fascinated by Oakland. I think part of it is growing up an Oakland A's fan. And then maybe in high school, being a part of a music scene where I was here like every weekend going to shows and having lots of friends here. And like Ali and I, our first date was in Oakland. Like, and that wasn't like intentional. It's just, that's where we go. That's just what we do. Yeah. So yeah, it's an amazing city, incredibly diverse city, lots of issues. But that's what makes doing ministry fun, is there's needs and there's brokenness, and we get to enter into that with people and try to help.
Absolutely. Well, there's a draw for you to that city and the people of that city, a heart for it. So when you decided to start Oak Life, I mean, talk to me a little bit. What did that look like? It certainly doesn't look like Crosswinds as we know it. I think we have some very similar values, but I think you looked at the culture of what was going to exist where you were and said, how do I do something that's really going to make a difference here?
Sure. Yeah, I think people are the same everywhere, but like culture and cities are drastically different, like those contexts. And so anyone who's trying to be a part of a culture has to learn the culture and assimilate, contextualize. And I think like for us early on, we spent a lot of time like, what would it look like to create something that reflects and is a part of this community? And I think actually the venue we meet in is a great like illustration of that. So we rent this theater called the New Parkway. The theater is the second iteration of this like pub movie community center that has a long history with Oakland. And its first iteration, it was like a really cool place to go get a beer and watch a movie on couches, like second run kind of stuff. The landlords jacked up the rent overnight and they closed down. A bunch of the patrons got together and did like a Kickstarter right when Kickstarter was starting, and funded enough to reopen. And it's kind of got this vibe of this is like a theater for Oakland, from Oakland. The warehouse they rent was actually occupied by Occupy Oakland. Like it was like a vacant warehouse.
Right.
So there's all this beautiful graffiti art on the wall that was like from Occupy Oakland.
Right.
And so that space just reflects a city, and we get to do church in the midst of that, like in
Mm-hmm.
culture. Their tagline, they don't have it anymore, but their initial tagline was Oakland's living room. And so to be able to worship in Oakland's living room in a space that's very neutral, that is more safe for people who have been hurt by the church or who have like issues with the church, it's a neutral space. And so it's fit us really well. And we built a really great relationship with their ownership, and we volunteered there a bunch, and we do partnership stuff with the theater. So I think that maybe that story kind of captures a little bit of the heart of how we planted a church, trying to be a part of the culture of Oakland in a sustainable way, in a way that helps other people out and reflects God's love.
I think it does, man. I remember us going and visiting that theater together. Do you remember that? I think it was like the second time you went and looked at it. I think I was with you. You had already been to see it once, and we were driving around. You're like, come take a look at this place with me. We went inside. There are churches that meet in movie theaters across the country. This is a very unique theater. It does not feel like the Regal here in Dublin, right? I mean, for those who haven't been inside, graffiti on the walls from Occupy Oakland, if I recall, right? That was
right
in there from that movement. Couches, as you're sitting and watching the movie, you can be sitting on a couch. Tables you can sit at, right? Mm-hmm. Almost like a jazz club in certain parts of it. The tables, you use all of that, right?
Yeah, yeah. We use both theaters and for like childcare and one for our service, and we do a lot of actually events there too, because they'll do open mics and like bingo nights, and so we just join in and are part of the community. And they have good food, and they've got beer and wine too. So
that's good.
It's an added perk.
That's good, man. Did you have beer and wine during your service?
Not yet. One time, actually, they had a portable like tap that for like different events, and we're setting up service, and I put like some sound equipment on this table, and I didn't realize I had kicked like the tap over, and it poured beer for like 10 minutes.
No.
So I told the Parkway when we cleaned it up, and they were like, yeah, I think we're going to get rid of that tomorrow. So if you want like beer, go for it. So as we're setting up, we could have partaked, but I don't think anybody did that I know of.
All right. Well, we would not hold it against you. I think that would be actually very much in character with the church I know you've started.
8 a.m. is a little early even for me.
That's true. Your services are early, right? Because you got to be out of there in time for people to start their movies.
Yep. Yeah. Services at 10. We're out by like 11:30 or 12.
Right. One of the things Chris was sharing with me before they started, I was asking him, hey, are you able to get away with not having to pay rent as a church plant right now, the weekly rental, because you are all sheltering in place? And he told me that their commitment to the theater is to continue to pay even through this whole thing. They've got a contract, but more so just the theater needs it, right? Because they're not open right now.
Right. Yeah, they're losing a lot of revenue, and they are like a big piece of Oakland and the community and the culture. And so most of their staff are paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
They pay well. They pay like as close to living wages I think they can, and they treat their employees really well. But even still, the Bay Area is so expensive.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Chris, I think that speaks to even just the kind of church you guys are. I know that when we were initially talking early on about your values as a church, so much of it was to serve your city. And I believe you're the only church I know of that actually has activism as one of your values, or at least it did early on in the early stages. Is that still part of your values as a church?
Yeah. I think if you take seriously biblical mandates of justice, the way that plays out now is being an ally, if that includes activism or whatever, politically, legally, even just relationally. There's a lot of that stuff. I mean, you want, if there's some sort of demonstration, I know it's like the gospel is beyond politics, but that's not to say it doesn't have political ramifications. And so I think there's a lot of those things that ring true for us and how we operate and contextualize and love our neighbor.
Yeah.
There's some people, we have a community justice team right now, and they're mostly rallying around homelessness. and partnering with a few different organizations, and even going to city council meetings and figure stuff out, which you guys are doing out there too.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely part of our ethos or culture or whatever.
Chris, one of the things I was going to ask you about was the virus and how it's affecting you guys and what it looks like for you in church right now. And we talked a little bit before we started recording about it's the same everywhere. Everybody's doing online, and they're kind of creating a service where people can come online and then online small groups and chats, and you guys are doing that as well. Maybe let's skip that and go to this next question that we had talked about a little bit, which is like, what in the world is the effect of this virus on the church long term? We talk about that for a few minutes. Is that all right?
I'd love to. I've been having that conversation in my head, so talking about it with other people would be fun.
What do you think? I mean, what are the initial thoughts that come to your mind on this thing?
I don't know. One, there's so much uncertainty. This could be, we could be out in a couple months. It could be like a year of disruption or longer.
Yeah.
I think the first thing is like the church has got to remember that we are not a service, like a Sunday service. We're supposed to be the hands and feet of Jesus, and this is a time of crisis. And so how do we do that?
Yeah.
So I think we got to move past like how do we do things online to like, holy crap, our world is hurting and we're the church. We're called to be, what does that mean for us to actually live into that? I do think it has potential to disrupt a lot of things long-term. Giving, if people can't meet on Sunday, most churches, that's how they support themselves financially. I think like the questions around, is church something we consume or is it something we're a part of, will really be revealed now, because it's easier to just consume a video online on Sunday and not be a part of a community or a part of what God's doing. And so I could see, and consumption doesn't last very long. People can't be consumers forever. It's definitely not what it means to be a disciple.
Let me ask you a question to let you in a little bit of my thought process on this.
It's good.
As a Bay Area pastor, I'm sure you've thought about this too, but I have, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit on Easter, but have you ever thought to yourself, if there was an earthquake, I'm talking like big Loma Prieta earthquake, and it knocked down the new parkway, or I think about our campus, like it caused a fire and our auditorium burned down. What would we do? And how would we go about being the church? Have you ever had that thought? Like, I feel like
absolutely.
Every 6 months I have this like thought, and then I plan out what it would all look like, right? And so here's my thought when I started thinking about it. I'm like, all right, well, we couldn't use our auditorium. We would use our barn, and we'd have 10 services a Sunday, or we'd go out in the field if the weather was nice enough, or we would use our parking lot to stage FEMA tents and the Red Cross, and we would figure out a way to create a ministry center out of this place, and we'd be the church in the middle of all of this. And we would go to meeting the needs of people all over the Bay Area right now, and we'd mobilize that way, right? These are all the thoughts I've had. And within it, I have this thought of, we might miss a few Sundays. We might miss a few Sundays in our normal, thing. Well, here we are. Something that is devastating as it is probably less big than a giant Loma Prieta size earthquake. And we're talking missing 8 to 12 Sundays, maybe more than that in all likelihood. And now we can't even gather in small groups. Everybody's in their home. And yes, we can go serve. We can go help the homeless right now. And we can even serve those most at risk. And we can serve our the people who are working in medical professions and try to come alongside them. But even the other kinds of service we would do scaled way back right now, right? I mean, like, this is more shaking of what the church is than anything I could have imagined.
Yeah, I agree. And it's weird. Like, I have 2 really good pastor friends who are in Manhattan, and they're getting hit really hard. And it's like, I can't go to the hospital to like visit these people. We can't gather. We can't like pray with people. All we can really do is have Zoom conversations and like send money. And it's a weird one because of that like isolation aspect. So I agree. I think the things that are needed most right now, I'm seeing at least, are people feeling isolated and finding some way to connect people. Thank God for technology. I don't know what we would do if this happened like 20 years ago.
Absolutely.
We really, really were just cooped up in our houses, like guess we'd have lots of like conversations online.
You know, it's a funny thing is we were having a staff meeting last month, maybe 2 months ago. We devoted 90 minutes to just sitting together and talking through what we felt like our digital, what ministry would look like for us virtually or digitally. And what we were talking about is, should we put more effort and energy into online services, online small groups, any of those things? Or should we be pulling away from digital and trying to get people in person? And part of what was leading to that for us was we could just continue to see a rise in more and more people choosing to watch online. And maybe Sunday's not as big of a priority to skip the other things we could be doing out in the world. And so, hey, if I miss a church service on Sunday, I'll make sure I'm there online, right? So for us, we were like, should we abandon it all, or should we push further into the digital? And we find ourselves now forced to push further into the digital. And I think we're starting to see it actually works. Like, we're seeing more people watch our services, more people regularly show up for small group online than are able to make it consistently in person.
Yeah. And my question, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, is like, is that because we're in the initial stages of crisis and we're all leaning into the things we need, which is community? Or can this be sustainable? I mean, I personally, my own bias is I don't like the technology stuff. I don't think it's a good substitute for in-person relationships.
Yeah.
But there's utility to it right now for sure. And I think for us, it's working because we have a context already built and relationships already there.
Right.
I don't know how you'd build it. Like I know you really well, so we can have banter and like we've got a history.
Yeah.
But it'd be harder to do that going forward. But it might be the only thing we do.
How do you meet a new person online in this format? What does it look like?
Right.
Yeah. And at the same time, I wonder, here I am, we have a 35-acre plot of land that we are set to do ministry on. And I look and I'm like, but maybe all you need is a laptop screen too.
Sure.
Right. I mean, like sometimes we are finding in the middle of this that we can connect people. You'll appreciate this as our former middle school pastor. We had a brand new kid who we've never met before show up for middle school small groups the other night, that found us online through a friend in the middle of all that's going on, needed a church and was bored. And those led to him going, I'm going to be a part of this in a way that I don't know that they would have if we were playing Gaga Ball out back on a Wednesday night.
Totally. It's where culture is, and increasingly so. Yeah, we had a bunch of people who were guests online from other parts of the country on Sunday that, like, one of them was an adjacent family member and they're not Christians, but they want, so there's even more people curious on that end that there might be an opportunity there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder for us if I don't see that there's value in telling story and that story becomes a part of our future more too. So we're recording these podcasts every weekday. We're putting one out every weekday, and the great thing is you'll be our 12th here, I think, that we've recorded. And for people to get to hear these kind of conversations, it is part of what might be a new reality for our church, in a way for us to stay engaged a little bit more throughout the week beyond just Sunday.
For sure. And if it's done like authentically, like a real conversation. Have you been watching any of the late night guys right now? Like Jimmy Kimmel from Home. It's so good. It takes all of the polish away. Yeah. It's awkward. Yeah. Their kids are coming in, but it's like, part of me is like, oh, we'd never needed all those lights and stuff anyways. We just wanted that human connection. Yeah. And this is more of that. So maybe there's an opportunity there too.
That's good, man.
Not that lights aren't cool.
Sometimes. All right, dude. Hey, man, we're at 23 minutes and we're trying to keep these things to around 15. So we're 8 minutes longer. Anything else we should talk about?
No, just to Crosswinds, thank you for everything. It means a lot. And Oak Life wouldn't be around without Crosswinds. And I'm not just saying that as like a soundbite, but that's the reality. So thank you.
Thanks, man. Dude, we're really proud of you and excited to see your ministry there. And it has been fun watching it. How many years old are you guys now?
6. Yeah. So I don't think we're considered a church plant anymore. We just hit our 5th birthday, but yeah, we're a fully sustainable, healthy, growing, absolutely, miraculous, in spite of my efforts, healthy church.
We're excited for you. See you.